They thought she was nobody until the legal team walked in and called her the sole decision maker on their deal. You ever have a day where you wake up thinking it's just another shift, nothing special, same routine, same uniform, same tired smile? That's exactly where Alyssa Carrington's head was the morning she headed to the Laurel Room, a high-end restaurant tucked inside an art hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona. She tied her apron, pulled her hair back, and tried to convince herself she didn't mind working a double. Rent didn't care how exhausted she was. Tips were slower lately, and she wasn't the type to quit, even when life felt heavy. The dining room smelled like roasted garlic and polished wood. Servers moved like they were rehearsing a dance. The chandeliers weren't loud or flashy, but they made everything look more expensive than it needed to be. Alyssa walked in through the side hallway, clocked in, and grabbed her order pad. Nobody greeted her with excitement. She was just another face on the schedule. "Morning, Alyssa," said her coworker, Nora Hernandez, adjusting a tray stand. "You ready? Table 7 is already acting like they own the place." Alyssa smirked. "They always think they do." "You'll see," Nora whispered. "They're worse than usual." Alyssa didn't think much of it. Wealthy groups came in often, men in tailored jackets, women with diamonds that caught the light every time they lifted a fork, people who spoke to staff like they were ordering furniture to move itself. She had dealt with all kinds. You learn to swallow reactions when tips determine groceries. Still, something felt different as she approached table 7. 4 executives in sharp suits sat around a stack of documents and tablets. Their voices were clipped, like every minute mattered more than the air around them. Alyssa stayed polite and steady. "Good afternoon," she said. "My name's Alyssa. I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with sparkling water still or something else?" One of the men didn't look up. Another waved his hand as if she were blocking his sunlight. "We'll need a bottle of the Cabernet Reserve," said the oldest one, his silver watch catching her eye. "And hurry, we're on a schedule." Alyssa wrote it down. "Of course, I'll bring that right out." As she walked away, she heard one of them mutter, not even trying to hide it. "Service staff gets slower every year." The others chuckled, not loud, but loud enough. Alyssa kept her composure. She always did. That was her strength, never giving anyone the satisfaction of seeing her bothered. She picked up the wine, checked the label twice, and returned to the table with steady hands. "Would you like me to open it here?" she asked. "Or would you prefer it sent to the side station first?" The man with the silver watch finally looked up. His eyes scanned her like she was an object on a shelf. "Here," he said, "and don't fumble it." Nora watched from across the room, ready to jump in if needed. The cork slid smoothly, no slip, no mistake. Alyssa poured a small taste for approval, just like she had done hundreds of times before, but he didn't even sip it before waving her on. "Pour for everyone." The conversation at the table continued, sharper now. "We can't afford mistakes," one executive said. "The board wants signatures today," another added. Alyssa didn't know what deal they were discussing, but their stack of papers looked serious. She poured carefully, evenly, then stepped back. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said. This time, nobody acknowledged her at all, not even a nod. She walked away, and for a moment, she wondered why people with so much treated others with so little. She didn't complain. She didn't tell anyone she was tired. She didn't mention the phone call she had received weeks earlier, one that changed everything, even though she hadn't told a soul. If someone had told her that within the next hour, those same executives would be begging for her attention, she would have laughed. It sounded impossible, ridiculous, like something that happened in movies, not real life. But she had no idea the papers on that table had her family name printed on them, and she had no idea those men were about to humiliate the person whose approval they desperately needed. But the shift was only beginning, and the first crack in their arrogance was seconds away. The lunch rush picked up fast, and Alyssa barely had a second to breathe. Plates of seared salmon, truffle pasta, and grilled asparagus slid across the pass. Orders piled up, voices layered over each other. Someone dropped a fork in the kitchen, someone else cursed at the fryer, and the manager pretended everything was smooth. Alyssa moved through it all with quiet focus, but table 7 kept pulling her attention like a stone in her shoe. When she returned to check on them, the man with the silver watch let out a sigh, as if her presence alone inconvenienced him. "We asked for bread 15 minutes ago," he snapped. Alyssa kept her tone level. "I'll bring it right out. I apologize for the delay." Another man leaned back in his chair, glancing at her name tag. Alyssa, he said slowly, do you have trouble keeping track of simple requests? She blinked once. No, sir, I'll take care of it. Nora passed her near the service station. What's their problem? They're under pressure, Alyssa said, even though she didn't believe pressure excused disrespect. In the kitchen, the chef slid a breadboard toward her. Table 7 again? He asked. Unfortunately. She grabbed the board and returned, setting it down gently. There you go. Anything else I can get for you right now? One of the executives raised an eyebrow. You could start by being faster, he said. We're handling something larger than your pay grade. Another chimed in, his tone smug. This deal is worth more than this entire restaurant makes in 10 years. Alyssa didn't react, but she noticed the folder sitting closest to them, a logo. A company name she recognized. Not from ads, not from gossip, but from that confusing call she had received from a probate lawyer in Santa Fe, New Mexico. A distant relative she barely remembered. Shares transferred, documents pending. Something about her being the final signature holder. She had thought it was some strange clerical error. She hadn't claimed anything yet. She hadn't told anyone. She hadn't even processed it. But seeing the same company name here, at this table, in front of these men? Her stomach tightened. Still, she stayed focused. Let me know if you need refills, she said. She turned to step away, but one of them spoke again. Actually, yes, the silver watchman said. More wine, and try not to take all day. She nodded and went to retrieve another bottle, feeling eyes on her from nearby diners who noticed the tone but stayed silent. People always stayed silent. Back at the table, she poured with steady hands. One of the men spoke without looking up. You know what the problem is with service workers? He said to his colleagues. No ambition, no vision, no understanding of the real world. Alyssa heard every word, but she kept her face calm. Another laughed. She'll be wiping tables while we finalize an $800 million contract. Imagine that. He thought it was funny. They all did. Nora passed again, whispering, If you need me to switch tables with you, I can talk to management. Alyssa shook her head. I'm fine. I can handle them. The truth was, she didn't want to avoid the table. Something inside her, something she didn't usually feed, wanted to witness what came next. It wasn't anger. It was something quieter, heavier, something like patience sharpening itself. The men continued reviewing pages, pointing at highlighted paragraphs. Their voices rose and fell with tension. We can't move ahead without authorization, one said. The representative is supposed to arrive within the hour, another answered. Silverwatch scoffed. Whoever they send better be competent. I'm done wasting time today. Alyssa refilled a glass, and a drop of wine slipped down the side of the bottle. Before she could wipe it, Silverwatch leaned back sharply. Careful, he said. You're making a mess. She checked the tablecloth, spotless. I apologize, she said, even though she knew there was nothing to apologize for. The man smirked like he had won something. The room around them carried on. Couples talking, coworkers sharing lunch, tourists taking pictures near the lobby art display. But table 7 felt like a storm cloud in the middle of a sunny sidewalk, and Alyssa stood right beneath it. The documents shifted again, and she saw her family name printed in bold, Carrington Holdings. She felt the air change in her chest. She wondered if they would notice her staring, so she forced herself to look away. She picked up the empty wine bottle and took a step back. She didn't know why she was suddenly nervous. Maybe because the truth was sitting inches from the people who assumed she had no value. Maybe because she knew something they didn't. Maybe because power sometimes waits quietly before it shows itself. But their arrogance was about to get louder, and the moment that pushed everything over the edge was on its way. The tension around table 7 kept tightening like someone slowly pulling a knot. Alyssa returned with fresh glasses and a calm expression, even though her pulse started to pick up. She placed the clean stemware down one by one, careful and precise. One of the men looked at her with a smirk that didn't match anything she'd done wrong. You ever consider a different line of work? He asked, swirling the last of his wine before finishing it. Something that requires less coordination? Another chuckled. She probably thinks this is her big career. Alyssa didn't bite. Let me know if you'd like a different vintage, she said. Silverwatch tipped his empty glass toward her without looking up. Pour another, and this time, try not to drag your feet. She brought the next bottle, checked the label, and opened it smoothly. She started pouring for him first, slow and steady. Then, as she reached the second man, he made a show of leaning back, lifting his chin, and saying loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "Service staff should learn to move with purpose. We don't have all day." A couple at table 9 looked over, uncomfortable. Nora stared, waiting to see if she should step in. The manager pretended to read a clipboard. Alyssa kept pouring, but the third man suddenly shifted his chair, bumping her arm slightly. The wine tilted. A splash hit the edge of his sleeve. Barely a drop. Barely noticeable. He jerked his head toward her like she had flung it on purpose. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped. Alyssa set the bottle down. "I'm sorry, sir. You moved suddenly. Let me get a cloth." He stood, towering his voice over hers. "You don't touch me. You don't speak unless spoken to. Do you understand that?" The room went quiet. Forks paused. Someone cleared their throat. Silverwatch pushed his chair back and grinned, enjoying the scene. Maybe she needs a reminder of her place. Before Alyssa could respond, the man who had stood up reached for her apron, then tipped his own glass of red wine forward, letting it spill across her front, soaking into the fabric and dripping down toward her shoes. The liquid ran dark and obvious, like he wanted the moment to stain. Gasps came from nearby tables. Nora dropped a stack of dessert menus. The chef stuck his head out of the kitchen. The manager finally rushed over. "Sir, please, there's no need," the manager stammered, trying to de-escalate without actually taking a side. The man brushed his sleeve, pretending he was the one wronged. "If she can't handle a simple pour, she shouldn't be working here." Alyssa felt the warmth of the wine against her skin. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just stood there, staring at the man who wanted her to break in front of strangers. "Let me get cleaned up," she said quietly and stepped back. Silverwatch chuckled. Finally, she gets the message. The manager put a hand on her shoulder, guiding her away like she was fragile. "You can take a break," he whispered. "I'll send someone else to the table." Alyssa stopped walking. "No, I'll finish the shift." The manager blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm sure." In the staff hallway, Nora followed her. "You don't have to serve them again. Nobody would blame you." Alyssa wiped the stain with a towel, watching it smear instead of disappear. "It's fine." "It's not fine," Nora insisted. "They crossed the line." Alyssa paused, gripping the edge of the counter. Her voice stayed even, but her words carried weight. "People show who they are when they think no one's watching." Nora frowned. "So why keep going back?" Alyssa folded the towel, her movement slow and deliberate. "Because they're wrong about me. And I'm not running from men who think they get to decide someone's worth." She walked back into the dining room, the stain still visible, but her posture taller. Table 7 didn't look up at first. They assumed she would shrink, apologize, vanish into the background like they expected. Instead, she stood beside them and said, "Is there anything else you'd like at the moment?" All 4 men went silent for the first time. They didn't know why her voice sounded different. They didn't know why her eyes held steady. They didn't know they had just poured wine on the majority owner of the company they were desperate to impress. But someone else was about to walk through the restaurant doors, and their entire attitude would flip in an instant. Alyssa stayed near table 7 without hovering, giving them space while still doing her job. The men whispered now instead of bragging. Their shoulders pulled in. Their confidence didn't stretch across the room anymore. It was the first sign that the balance had started to tilt, even if they didn't know why. She refilled waters at nearby tables, collected dishes, and checked on a couple celebrating an anniversary. Every now and then she caught the executives glancing at her, like they suddenly wondered if they had misread the situation. Nora slipped beside her at the espresso station. "They're quiet now," she said. "What did you say to them?" "Nothing," Alyssa replied. "Silence sometimes says more." In truth, her mind was running. She thought about that long phone call weeks earlier with the probate lawyer in Albuquerque. She remembered sitting at her small kitchen table, staring at the peeling corner of the wallpaper, while the attorney explained that her late relative, Edmund Carrington, had no direct heirs. The name had meant almost nothing to her until she learned that he was the founder of Carrington Holdings, a massive supply and logistics corporation with offices across the country. She had barely spoken a word while the lawyer listed numbers, percentages, documents, and legal transfers. You are the majority shareholder now, the lawyer had said. Nothing can be finalized without you. She had laughed softly, thinking it was absurd. She worked nights, she folded napkins, she stocked sugar packets. She wasn't the kind of person who owned anything, much less a company that partnered with international firms, but the paperwork arrived. Thick envelopes, seals, official markings. She tucked them into a drawer, telling herself she'd deal with it later. Life didn't pause just because something unbelievable dropped into your lap. Rent still came due, shifts still needed covering, and she didn't want anyone looking at her differently. Now here she was, staring at the same company name on documents being passed between men who thought she had no future beyond carrying plates to table numbers printed in brass. The manager approached quietly. Alyssa, listen, we can comp their appetizers, just to smooth things over. Alyssa looked at him. Why? They're the ones who crossed the line. The manager shifted his weight. They're important. They tipped well last time. She held his stare. So that makes it acceptable? He didn't answer. He walked away instead. When she returned to the table again, the tone had changed. Silver Watch cleared his throat. We'll need dessert menus, he said, but his voice didn't carry the same edge. Alyssa nodded. Right away. Another man adjusted his tie, trying to sound casual. We didn't mean to be harsh earlier. Tensions are high. Alyssa placed the dessert menus in front of them. Stress doesn't give anyone permission to mistreat people. The men fell silent. One tapped his pen. Another shifted his chair. The power they thought they owned no longer sat comfortably with them. A moment later, a well-dressed woman in a navy suit entered the dining room. She scanned the tables, holding a leather briefcase and a folder with embossed lettering. Her hair was tied back, her steps confident. She approached the manager first. I'm here to meet with the representatives for the Carrington Partnership, she said. I was told they're at table 7. The manager pointed. Right over there. They've been waiting. The executives straightened like schoolboys trying to impress a principal. Silver Watch stood and extended his hand. We've been expecting you, he said. The woman didn't shake his hand. Instead, she looked past him, directly at Alyssa. Ms. Carrington, she said, voice clear enough for half the restaurant to hear, we're ready for your authorization whenever you are. The room stilled. Forks paused again. Nora's mouth fell open. Silver Watch turned pale. I'm sorry. Who? The woman repeated it without hesitation. Ms. Alyssa Carrington, majority owner and final signatory. The executives stared at Alyssa, realizing the truth one agonizing inch at a time. Alyssa didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply said, let's find a quiet place to talk. But the shock on their faces was only the beginning, and the real reversal was still coming. The woman in the navy suit guided Alyssa toward the private meeting room near the back of the restaurant. The executives trailed behind, their confidence gone, their steps slower, their eyes avoiding hers. Nora stood frozen near the espresso machine, watching like she couldn't believe any of it was real. The manager looked between Alyssa and the suited woman, trying to figure out how he had missed something so important. Inside the meeting room, the air felt different. The table was set with polished glasses and folded napkins, but nobody sat right away. The woman placed her briefcase down and opened the folder with practiced movements. My name is Dana Whitmore, she said. I'm counsel for Carrington Holdings. Thank you for making time on short notice. Silver Watch tried to regain authority. There must be a misunderstanding. She works here. Dana didn't blink. Ms. Carrington is the controlling shareholder. You're here today because your firm requested a partnership with her company. Another executive stepped forward. We were told the representative would be someone from the board. Dana slid a document across the table. The board cannot approve anything without Ms. Carrington's signature. Alyssa stood quietly, letting the words hang in the room. She didn't rush to sit. She didn't apologize. She didn't shrink. The men who had dumped wine on her apron now looked like they were trying to shrink into their tailored jackets. Silver Watch cleared his throat again. Why didn't you say who you were earlier? Alyssa finally spoke. Because you never asked. You only assumed. The words landed hard. The men exchanged looks, each hoping someone else would speak first. Dana continued, pulling out more documents. Your proposal includes a 10-year supply contract, distribution rights, and shared expansion costs. Before Ms. Carrington signs anything, she needs to be comfortable with the people entering the agreement. Another man tried to soften the moment. We didn't mean any disrespect earlier. Emotions were high. Alyssa sat down at the head of the table. Mistreating someone because you think they're beneath you isn't a mistake. It's a choice. The executives lowered their eyes. Dana pointed to a signature line. We can continue if Ms. Carrington is satisfied with the partnership terms and the professionalism of the parties involved. The executives scrambled to adjust their tone. We value this relationship, one said. We respect your leadership, another added, his voice wavering. Alyssa looked at the contract. The papers felt heavy, not because of the legal language, but because of what signing meant. She thought about every shift where people snapped fingers at her, every time someone treated her like she didn't matter, every moment she forced herself to smile just to pay for groceries. She thought about people like Nora, who worked hard without recognition. She thought about how many others were judged based on uniforms, titles, or hourly wages. Silverwatch leaned forward, forcing a smile. If there's anything we can do to show good faith... Alyssa cut him off gently, not harsh, just firm. Good faith starts before you need something. Silence settled again. Dana looked to Alyssa. Would you like time to think before deciding? Alyssa nodded once. Yes, I'll review everything. I'll give you an answer soon. The executives exhaled with relief, assuming soon meant they still had a chance. They stood, trying to behave like respectful professionals now. One extended his hand, but Alyssa didn't take it. Instead, she stood and said, My shift isn't over. I need to return to the dining room. The men looked stunned. You're going back to work? One asked. For now, Alyssa replied. I finish what I start. She walked out of the meeting room with Dana beside her. Nora stared wide-eyed. Was that real? Nora whispered. Alyssa smiled faintly. Very real. The manager rushed over, stumbling over his words. Ms. Alyssa, I didn't know. If I had known... You would have treated me differently? She asked. He swallowed. I don't know. I do, she said softly, then headed back toward the server's station. The stain on her apron had dried, still visible. She didn't hide it. She didn't change. She picked up a tray and returned to work like the world hadn't just shifted around her. But the executives weren't done scrambling yet, and the next move they made would reveal even more about who they really were. The executives regrouped at table 7, speaking in low voices while Alyssa continued serving other guests. Their dessert plates sat untouched, and the air around them felt tight, like they were waiting for a verdict they couldn't influence. One of them kept checking his phone, another tapped a pen against his folder, and Silverwatch stared at the door as if expecting someone to rescue him. Nora leaned toward Alyssa while polishing glasses. They looked terrified. Alyssa kept her tone steady. People get nervous when they lose the control they thought they had. The manager approached again, trying to act supportive. If you want the rest of the shift off, I can... I said I'm fine, Alyssa reminded him. My tables still need me. He backed away, unsure what to do with himself. Then one of the executives stood and walked toward her. His voice was softer now, almost rehearsed. Ms. Carrington, he said, forcing a polite expression, we'd appreciate another chance to discuss the contract. We respect your position. Alyssa looked at him without flinching. Respect isn't real if it only shows up when you need something. He opened his mouth to reply, but had no words. Silverwatch stood next, smoothing his jacket. We truly regret earlier. We misunderstood. If we had known... That's the point, Alyssa said. You shouldn't need to know someone's status to treat them like a human being. The words hit harder than raised voices ever could. A couple at a nearby table watched, eyes wide. A group of friends near the bar whispered to each other. Word had spread without anyone announcing anything. People could feel the shift. Dana returned briefly, handing Alyssa an updated folder. These are revised terms for your review. Take your time, she said before leaving again. The executives stared at the packet like it contained their fate. Nora leaned closer. Are you actually thinking about signing with them? Alyssa exhaled slowly. I'm thinking about what it means if I do, and what it means if I don't. She carried a tray of empty dishes back to the kitchen. The chef stopped her. I heard what happened, he said, keeping his voice low. You handled it better than most. Alyssa set the dishes down. Anger doesn't fix anything. The chef nodded. No, but consequences do. When she stepped back into the dining room, the executives stood again, as if they felt obligated. Silverwatch tried a new angle. We're willing to adjust compensation terms. Your leadership is valuable. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. You don't know anything about my leadership. You've only seen me serve lunch. He swallowed hard. Then allow us to learn. It was the closest thing to humility he had shown. Another man stepped forward. We can donate to organizations of your choosing. Community outreach, job programs, whatever you think reflects your priorities. Alyssa paused at that. Not because she trusted them, but because the idea itself mattered. She thought about staff who worked double shifts, people juggling 2 jobs, workers invisible in plain sight. Nora whispered, "You could change things. You could make them do something good." Alyssa didn't smile, but something thoughtful settled behind her eyes. She walked back to table 7 and said, "Sit, all of you." They obeyed immediately, like the ground rules had been rewritten. Alyssa placed her hands on the back of an empty chair. If this partnership moves forward, there will be conditions, real ones. Silver Watch leaned in. Of course, name them. First, Alyssa said, every employee affiliated with this contract on both sides will receive fair treatment and fair pay, no exceptions. They nodded quickly. Second, she continued, your executives will complete mandatory workplace conduct training, not the kind people ignore, the kind that requires proof of comprehension. They nodded again, even faster. And third, she said, a percentage of the contract value will fund scholarships for workers who want better opportunities, people who've been told they don't belong anywhere but behind a tray. The room was silent. Finally, one of the men spoke. We can agree to those terms. Alyssa studied their faces. Not because I'm wealthy, not because you fear losing a deal, but because it's the right thing to do. Silverwatch lowered his eyes. Yes, we understand. Alyssa didn't confirm anything yet. She gathered the documents and said, I'll give you my decision after I finish my shift. They looked stunned again. You mean later today? One asked. Yes, she said. After I'm done working like every other person you overlooked today. She walked away, leaving them sitting straighter, quieter, and unexpectedly reflective. But the final decision would come with a twist they didn't expect, and the whole restaurant would witness it. The afternoon light shifted through the restaurant windows as the last of the lunch crowd finished eating. The noise settled, replaced by quiet conversations and clinking glasses. Alyssa continued bussing tables, refilling drinks, and checking receipts like nothing unusual had happened. But everyone knew something had changed. Even the dishwasher peeked into the dining room more than once, trying to catch pieces of the story. Table 7 stayed seated, waiting, pretending to read through their folders, but glancing at Alyssa every few seconds. Their voices never rose above a whisper now. Their posture had shrunk. Their earlier arrogance had drained out of them like the wine stains drying on Alyssa's apron. Nora stepped beside her at the server station. Are you really deciding today? She asked. Yes, Alyssa replied, folding a napkin. I don't believe in dragging things out. What do you think you're going to do? I'm thinking, Alyssa said, though her expression hinted she already knew. A couple at table 9 motioned for the check, and Alyssa went to help them. The woman at the table smiled warmly. You handled yourself with grace, she said quietly. Her husband nodded. My father worked in restaurants his whole life. People forget the hands that serve them. Alyssa thanked them and moved on, but their words stayed with her. Back near table 7, the executives stood when she approached. One cleared his throat. We're prepared to sign with your conditions, he said. All of them. Another added quickly, and we would like to offer our personal apologies for earlier. It was unprofessional, and we regret it. Alyssa looked at each of them. An apology only matters if it comes with change. They nodded, feeling the weight of the words. Dana returned to the room, setting her briefcase down. If you'd like to finalize now, we can. Alyssa didn't sit right away. She looked at the papers again, thinking not about money, but about meaning. She imagined workers in warehouses being treated better. She imagined scholarships opening doors for people like Nora. She imagined training programs that forced people in power to confront their behavior. Then she imagined signing with men who only changed because they were caught. She raised her eyes. Before I make this decision, there's something you should understand. The executives waited, tense. You treated me poorly because you thought I was beneath you, she said. And if I sign without addressing that fully, then I'm no better than you were. Silverwatch spoke softly. What do you need from us? Alyssa gestured toward the dining room. You embarrassed me publicly. You didn't pull me aside. You didn't correct yourselves privately, so the acknowledgement needs to match the harm. The men looked toward the other diners, realizing what she meant. You want us to apologize? Out there? One asked. Alyssa didn't raise her voice. Yes, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. The men looked at each other, weighing pride against consequences. Then slowly, they walked out into the main dining room. Conversations quieted, people watched. Silverwatch stepped forward first. To the staff here, he said, voice steady but humbled, we acted disrespectfully earlier. We spoke down to someone who deserved respect. We apologized to Ms. Carrington and to the employees who saw it happen. A few people in the dining room nodded. Someone at the bar clapped once, not loud, but enough to break a barrier. Alyssa stepped forward with the contract in hand. Thank you, she said. Now I'll sign. Dana placed the document on the counter. Alyssa picked up the pen and wrote her name slowly, clearly, without hesitation. The executives watched, knowing the moment belonged to her, not them. As she handed the signed pages back, she said, This isn't about money. It's about people remembering that titles don't define worth. The executives nodded, and this time, they meant it. Nora rushed up as soon as they stepped away. You just changed everything, she whispered. Alyssa smiled gently. Not everything, just the parts that needed changing. The manager approached cautiously. Ms. Carrington, will you still be working here? Alyssa untied her apron. Not as an employee. He swallowed. Are you leaving for good? She folded the apron neatly. I'll be back tomorrow. He looked confused. In what role? As the owner who's buying this place, she said, and the first change is going to be how we treat the people who keep it running. Nora gasped. The chef peeked out of the kitchen again. Someone at table 9 muttered, well, that's one way to end a shift. Alyssa hung the apron on its hook, stood straighter, and walked toward the exit as the entire room watched with a mix of awe and respect. But there was still one more thing she needed to say before the story ended, and it carried the lesson people would remember. Outside the restaurant, the Arizona heat pressed against the glass windows, but Alyssa stood in the shade near the valet stand, breathing in a moment that felt bigger than her. Not because of the contract, not because of the money, but because she had stood her ground without raising her voice, without throwing insults back, without becoming what they expected. Nora stepped outside after her, holding 2 to-go lemonades. You okay? She asked, handing one over. I'm better than okay, Alyssa said. I'm clear. They sat on the stone ledge near the entrance. Cars pulled in and out. People chatted. Life moved like always, but Alyssa felt different inside. She thought about her mother, who used to remind her that worth isn't something someone else gives you. You carry it yourself, even when no one sees it. Nora sipped her drink. Do you think those men actually learned anything? They learned that power isn't always visible, Alyssa said, and that respect isn't optional. A few minutes later, the executives exited the restaurant. They didn't swagger this time. They didn't talk loudly. They approached Alyssa with careful steps. Silverwatch spoke first. We'll honor the terms, all of them, and we'll implement the scholarship program immediately. Another added, we've already contacted our HR division about the training requirements. Alyssa nodded. Good. But remember something. You don't treat people well because you might need them someday. You treat people well because it's the right thing to do, even when no one is watching. The men agreed, and for the first time, it didn't feel like they were pretending. As they walked to their cars, Nora let out a breath she'd been holding. You realize your life just changed forever, right? Alyssa smiled. My life changed before today. I just finally stepped into it. They sat quietly for a moment, watching the sun stretch across the pavement. Then Nora laughed softly. So, what's the first thing you're going to do as the new owner of a restaurant and head of a massive company? Alyssa stood, finishing her lemonade. I'm going home to rest. People make better choices when they're not exhausted. Nora laughed again. That's the most reasonable answer I've ever heard. Alyssa turned toward the parking lot, but then paused and looked back at her friend. You know, the world is full of people who judge others by uniforms, job titles, or where they stand in a room. But the truth is, you never know who you're talking to. You never know their story, their past, their potential, or where they're going next. Nora nodded slowly. So what's the lesson then? That you don't treat people with kindness because of who they are, Alyssa said. You treat them with kindness because of who you are. The words settled in the warm air. A family walked past them. A couple held hands near the corner. A server from another restaurant hurried by, tying her apron as she walked. Alyssa watched her for a moment, recognizing something familiar in her steps. She hoped the world would meet that woman with more grace than Table 7 had shown earlier. Alyssa headed toward her car, keys in hand, shoulders relaxed. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel like she had to prove anything. She simply felt like herself, and that was enough. Here's the takeaway, the heart of the story. People reveal their character and how they treat those they think can't offer them anything. But the truth is, everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves dignity. And someone's value isn't measured by a paycheck, a title, or a uniform. And if you're listening to this right now, here's your invitation. Treat people better. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for others. And never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their approval. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of someone you know, or someone you want to become, share it, talk about it, and make sure the message doesn't stop here.